The first scream rose from the forehold, thin and high, and then the deck filled with smoke. By the time the bell rang and men ran with buckets, the emigrant ship Cospatrick burned like a lantern, set too close to its own rigging. South Atlantic swells slapped the hull. Hundreds woke in panic. Cospatrick had sailed for New Zealand with families and laborers who carried their lives in canvas bags. Steerage was cramped, but hopeful. Officers kept a routine that felt unbreakable. Muster, inspection, prayers, lights out. The ocean had been steady for days, and then, near midnight, someone smelled it. Smoke. Lanterns swung. Orders snapped. The crew tried to smother the blaze with wet canvas and hand pumps, but the fire had already found fresh air between planks and seams. Tar and oakum that sealed the joints turned to fuel. Somewhere below, casks shifted and burst. A tongue of flame shot up the hatch and ran along the foot of the foremast. Women gathered children. Men heaved trunks aside. The first rush toward the ladders became a crush. Captain Elmsley kept his voice level and his orders simple. Bring water, shut the hatches, clear the decks. It bought minutes, not safety. Fire in a wooden ship behaved like a living thing. It found the sail locker. It climbed the tarred rigging and turned standing lines into ropes of light. The forward sails caught and fell in burning strips across the forecastle. A gust drove sparks aft and set small fires where men could not reach without turning their backs to worse ones. There were too few pumps and too many people. Hoses split. Buckets vanished into the crush. When the forward magazine, barrels and bottles that had no business near flame, went up, the shock rolled through the ship like a fist. The hull shuddered, smoke thickened and clawed at throats. Children screamed for water that no one had to give. Abandoned ship became less an order than a scramble. The davits carried only a handful of boats, because that was the law and the habit of the day. The first boat kissed the water cleanly, loaded with a mix of sailors and passengers, and hauled away toward a darkness that at least did not burn. A second swung and fell badly, smashing against the side and spilling people into firelit seas. A third tangled in rigging that had come down, and men cut lines until their knives turned hot. Behind them, the ship became a bonfire. The mainmast went like a match. The deck planks split and lifted. Some passengers jumped rather than wait. The sea took them quickly, or not at all, depending on luck and the way panic grips the human body. Those who made it into the two boats that got free turned and watched their homes sink by inches. In the small hours, Cospatrick went by the bow, and the last of the glow slid under and went out. The boats had water in small breakers and a few tins of ship's biscuit, far too little for the miles of ocean around them. They rigged a scrap of canvas as a sail and set their bows to the swell. Daylight brought a hard sky and a loneliness that tore at the will as much as hunger did. Cups were dipped carefully and swallows counted. Biscuit went soft with spray and hard again in the sun. Lips split. Tongues swelled. After 3 days, the first argument started. Who had taken more? Who had spilled a cup? Who had hoarded crumbs? They kept a tally of the living because it felt like duty. Then the tally changed. One man slumped and could not be roused. 2 more drank seawater against orders and went raving, pleading for drink even as they vomited. The boats drifted apart in a patch of fog and found each other again when it lifted, counting heads like mothers count children at market. They learned to sit still to save strength, to pass a hat against the sun, to pretend sleep when talking would only waste spit. On the 6th day, the water ran to drops. On the 7th, men stared at the bungs as if they might sweat miracles. On the 8th, someone suggested a ration that was not water and not biscuit, and no one answered for a long time. What happened after lived in guarded phrases in later statements, doing what had to be done, the sea taking more than it gave. There is no shade on an open boat, and no privacy for grief. Nights were worse than days. Cold came hard after sunset. Teeth chattered until jaws ached. Fear had time to speak. No one was coming. The world was only dark and salt, and a horizon that meant nothing. The men set watches they did not need, because the habit of duty kept them human. Sometimes they sang softly, not to pass time, but to remember that time still existed. On the 12th day, a smudge of sail appeared low and gray on the rim of the world. At first, it looked like another hallucination, the kind that burned and faded. But it grew. It gained masts and canvas and the white bite of foam along a bow. They had no signal to light. They hoisted a shirt on an oar and shouted until voices failed. The ship altered course. The wake curled toward them in a bright line that was the prettiest thing any of them would ever see. A British vessel hove to and through lines. Hands reached down. Ropes burned palms. They were hauled aboard and given water slowly, carefully, because kindness delivered too quickly can kill. Out of all who had left the burning ship, only 3 lived to step on that deck, 2 seamen and 1 passenger. The other boat never appeared again. The 3 men's accounts later varied in small ways: how fast the fire spread, who first saw smoke, but agreed on the essentials. The blaze leapt from the forepart, the boats were launched in confusion, and the sea finished what the fire began. News traveled home on the same winds that had once filled emigrant sails. Families in New Zealand waited for letters and got telegrams instead. Britain read headlines that measured loss by the column inch and found no number large enough to carry it cleanly. Inquest men gathered in rooms that smelled of ink and damp wool and listened to testimony about stowage, drills, and lamps. They wrote old truths. Flammable stores sat too near heat. Pumps were not enough. Lifeboats too few. Drills too rare. The public anger ran ahead of the ink. Emigration agents faced hard questions. Shipping firms promised reforms. Preachers spoke from pulpits about duty to the living and mercy for the dead. A few battered relics, charred timbers, a scorched trunk were displayed and then put away, because looking at them did not help anyone sleep. The survivors were asked for details they could not give without shaking. Their names went into the reports, their silences told the rest. Rules tightened after, as they usually do. Lists were made, inspections grew sharper, emigrant ships left with more boats and better drills. That is the history the living can bear. Improvements and the promise that next time will be safer. But the sea keeps the rest. It kept the fire that turned a proud ship into a pyre. It kept 2 open boats blinking in hard daylight. It kept the 3 men who learned that surviving can be a heavier burden than dying. And miles from where Cospatrick went down, it kept all the names not written anywhere. The story endures because it is built from ordinary materials. A Gondatlan ember, a cargo stowed with optimism, a law that counted boats by habit rather than need, a night when procedure bent under heat, and then a small boat under a wide sky, days long enough to change a man's idea of mercy. Cospatrick left no monument but water. What the survivors did say was spare and unadorned, which is what truth sounds like after 12 days in a boat. A ship caught fire far from land. 2 boats got clear. Only 3 men lived to step aboard a rescuer. Everything else belongs to the sea and to the silence people keep when the worst thing they ever saw still waits behind their eyelids. Thank you for listening to the Sunken Ledger. Subscribe for more true stories from the depths.